though we're introducing them to things. But, if we don't educate the children or the parents of the children, the cycles are going to continue. So a lot of it is, we run these Facebook pages. We kind of throw out information, facts, try to just break it. For years, probably until Maggie passed away, I never openly told anybody in my family that my child was an addict. And I started talking. And I started realizing that the next door neighbors, just in general, like this one has a child of an addict. This one grew up as a father of an addict. So you just, until we start talking and sharing stories, it's going to continue.
Yeah, and the more exposure you have or you talk about it, like you said, you meet people who have the same experiences, who are probably going through the same thing that you're going through, but didn't know because they wanted to keep it to themselves. Exactly.
And I can tell you, I'm not ashamed of my child at all. I love my child to death. I'm not ashamed of her. I will walk beside her every step of the way. I will be there regardless of what she does, the outcome of her disease. However, I was ashamed of myself. I was ashamed of myself to admit that I allowed this to happen. And that was a long, long time that I lived with that. And, now I realize, again, I know today I didn't do anything. I gave her the best that I could. And she had this in her, hereditary. It runs all throughout our family. But again, going back to what I said, I grew up with an uncle that used heroin. I didn't know what he was doing. I thought he was tired all the time. So it comes from so many different backgrounds. And the biggest thing is we need to openly speak about it because, there's somebody else that is suffering the way I did for years about keeping it into myself, and just they need to know that they don't have to suffer.
Yeah, because if you look at it, and it doesn't matter, like addiction doesn't care about your walk of life.
Right.
And like when I tell people that, the drugs are just like a symptom of the problem. The drugs have like real little to do with the disease of addiction. That is just, like I'm fortunate I get to speak a lot with people and, and I tell people like I didn't become an addict because like I grew up in a chaotic household or because I grew up like in bad neighborhoods or because my dad was violent. My dad did, like, that's not why I became a drug addict. And it took years for me to understand, like, I became a drug addict behind feelings, because there's a chemical imbalance in my brain that doesn't allow me to express emotion and feelings the same way that somebody else does.
I'm trying to fill a void.
Yeah, and I was just fortunate, like I said, like I was real fortunate in my journey. I was really fortunate to be plucked out of Kensington and put on a plane and sent over to Los Angeles and see, because like when it comes to treatment, like there's the treatment world is insane. Like out here, like when I went out there and I seen what treatment looks like out there, I was like astonished.
And do you think that has to do with like funding? Or
100%. It's 100% about money. And it because it all boils down to insurance and what your insurance can pay. Like when I got to California, we pulled up in front of this house. It was like a $14 million house in Chatsworth, California. That was a treatment center. It's a mansion. My other experiences have been going to 49th and Market to Kirk. I don't want to say any other company names, but but going to the places that are institutions out here, and going and and the people that work there are people that they don't care who they have working there. They're just
working for a paycheck. They're not working to better the lives of the people that are coming in and out.
Exactly, and it's not about like trying to help that person coming in, to where these places that are all private insurance places where their employees are people that, like, wow, I can make good money and I can help people, and they vet the people that they're hiring compared to here where it's like, okay, I can get this check, and when you're in there, you hear a lot of people like, why they're in treatment out here in these places, like, man, this is like jail, like jail, and it boils down to it, me being a person that has been incarcerated and a person that's been in treatment, You know, it's the quality of the people that work there. Because being in jail, you get talked to like you're trash. You know, COs treat you horribly. You know, not all of them, but the majority of them. And then you go, you know, into a treatment center out here, and the technicians that are working there, like, they treat you like trash. You know, because they're just,
and you
there
already
for a
feel
paycheck.
bad because you're in this state. So it's like you're working on your recovery and your mental health.
Exactly.
For the most part.
You know,
and then you got people just talking down to you, making you feel worse about yourself.
You know, and that's another major thing too, is like, you know, when it comes to like a mental health, you know, somebody that suffers from depression, anxiety, OCD, that suffers from real mental health diseases, you know, you can't go into a 30-day program. You know, and I've learned this working in high-end treatment centers where we won't touch a mental health diagnosis for the simple fact is that we're not going to open that up and then send you out. Because it takes a long time, because you're talking about stabilizing people on medications. You're talking about opening wounds up, about trauma that happened at it. And in, you know, 30, 60, 90 days, that's just not long enough. You know, and then on top of it, because then you figure as soon as these people are dumped, they're 30, 60, 90 days and they're in a different state. Like, okay, you're just kicking them back to where they came from. You know, where's the programs that are 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, you know, where a person can go in and you can really dig deep and really open these things up and open these issues up and
find some actual,
you know, and
healing.
That's one of our things that we want to see in the future down the line, like that we're working hard towards, to where we have where SPARC, where we have our own places to be able to give the type of treatment that people need, because like today it's about putting a Band-Aid on things.
Yeah.
You know,
it's not treating the underlying condition. You just said 30, 60, 90 days. It's just the beginning, and having those 30 to 90 days of just a structure or something that's actually helping these people, and then you just leave them to go. And it's like, oh, you had all this to help, and now you don't have any of it at all. And
that goes back to housing, proper housing, because once they leave there, they're handed a list of shelters and meetings, and there's no shelter beds. So it kind of just puts them right back onto the street. And, you know, just imagine a person on the street that does not have family members like us that are going to educate, advocate, you know, what happens to them? Realistically, what happens to them?
I remember my uncle would, he would steal stuff to fund his addiction, and eventually nobody wanted him in the house,
right?
Even when it was winter. So he got to the point where he was just so used to the system in and out that he would make sure he would get locked up for the winter, come out in the summer,
right?
And like you said, it's a cycle.
It's just a cycle. And you know, we're fortunate that we do have a little bit of a background. I mean, we can pull resources a little bit for those that truly need it and want it. But there's so many out there that just don't have those resources that we've gathered. And then, you know, we met on our outreach 2 weeks ago. We met a guy that was just released from prison, and he overdosed that night. He randomly walked up to one of our guys, and we were able to get him into treatment out of the city. That doesn't happen every day. You know, that was, you know, I say all the time, sometimes God throws himself into where it needs to be. And, you know, that day we were able to get him out of Kensington and into a treatment outside the city. But, you know, how often does that happen? How often does you happen to run into a guy that actually has insurance that is not in the city? You know, it's you know, and then you have a lot of the people that are down there that are on parents or insurance, and so they do have taste of decent programs, and then they age out of the insurance, and then they're remembering the taste of the treatment that they got previously and really didn't take advantage of because they knew that they could go as many times as they wanted. And then they're left to go to, you know, a city-funded treatment center, and it's literally nothing like they're used to. So they walk day one, day two. You know, so, and, you know, with the drugs that are on the street now, I'm finding, and I don't know if you can talk more about it, is the detox is actually almost impossible. So they're losing so many people that have that willingness to go to treatment within the first day or two because they're not tolerating the detox. The system of assessment is you have to go and wait to get assessed. It can sometimes be 24 hours waiting prior to even going into the back. And then there's usually a 23-hour hold maximum once you're in the back. So in theory, it could be 2 days before they even get to a facility. How many people are we losing in that 2 days?
A ton. And it's been like that for a while. And, and that's something that I've learned too. Because I remember being out on the streets and going to the places that would, like, help people, and they would say, like, come back in 3 days, come back in 4 days, and I would have that little moment of willingness, and you just shattered it by telling me to come back. And that's where we're losing people.
Exactly.
Because it was like Denise was just talking about, like, you go and before you even get to, you got to do this assessment, and you're sitting in there, and the withdrawals start coming.
You can't wait.
No. And it's like, and it's even the medicines that they're giving for people to withdraw now because of the drugs that are out there. It takes them, they have to wait even longer to be able to take this medicine. So, and it's like, and I don't know, I haven't been in the Philadelphia part of how assessments were, but I remember when I was going through it, you're in there in a plastic chair with a gown on, and it's freezing cold. Like, it's not comfortable at all.
It's not a warming or welcoming experience. It's something you don't want to go through.
I have personally sat with somebody outside waiting just to go back for 12 hours, just sitting there. I mean, literally, I went shopping before I went and took somebody there, so I happened to have a cake in my car. I was, like, literally feeding them sugar just to, like, bribe them to get through another hour. And, and then the things that they're going through their mind, I mean, they're immediately, like, with the drugs that are out there, they're going 3-4 hours before they want to use again. And if they're sitting there for, again, I mean, I'm saying 2 days. It could be less, it could be more, but it's a long period of time. I'm, like, bribing them with sugar. I'll just to get them some kind of, sense to stay. And then if they get past that period of time, then they get to the facility. Then the facility has a period of waiting time before they'll give them a med. So it's just like a cycle. It should be an easier handoff in Philadelphia. And I know Bucks County and Montgomery County has a little bit of a different system. But for something in Philadelphia, the system is so difficult. And it really has nothing to do with the individuals at these assessments because their hands are tied as well. And
they can only do so much.
They can only do so much. And then there's certain facilities that always have beds, but they're the facilities that, like Bill was saying, it's a step up from prison. And, so the other thing is I want to say, we're saying all this, but if anybody truly has a desire to get sober, they can get sober anywhere. We know that. But just the hurdles are difficult,
How do you guys feel about safe injection sites? You hear, I mean, I don't know much about it. I just know that there's up in the air statistically, people always talk about numbers and statistics, but does it actually help?
I don't know. I have mixed emotions with that. It's definitely harm reduction. It's definitely less deaths.
And disease, right?
And disease. I have mixed emotions because there's a fine line of enabling and allowing, and then there's that harm reduction. So today, they're very focused on the number of deaths. So if we reduce the number of deaths, which is amazing by reducing the number of deaths, but if we do that, potentially the politicians are going to see that as a win, and therefore they're not going to necessarily change the broken system.
Okay.
And that's kind of the one thing that keeps me going. And I'm definitely harm reduction. I do first aid down there. I will clean wounds. I am pro harm reduction. But that piece of it is my only concern of how the politicians are going to see it as a win and not necessarily look more onto the proper housing and treatment. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I know with me, when they were doing it here, I was out in California, and I was following what they were doing. And I remember doing it because, like, I did, like, I love studying, I love reading, like I said, like, I love recovery, so I really, like, try and learn as much as I can, and I've read about over in Europe, the place where they did it, and in Canada, and the numbers, and